Hi everyone, my name is Tiwary, and today I'll be talking to you about intellectual treadmills and AI. I've always considered myself a bit of a wordsmith. Ever since I was 7, I carried a notebook around like it was an inhaler. But naturally, I also faced chronic writer's block. Back in 2020, during the height of the lockdowns, I finally conquered a massive bout of that block. I spent weeks agonizing over an epic story written entirely in verse about a sentient bicycle learning the value of perseverance. I proudly showed my finished manuscript to my father, expecting a standing ovation. He looked at it, looked at me, and said, "That's nice. Watch this." He pulled out his phone, typed in, "Write me a story about a bicycle learning the value of perseverance in the style of Shakespeare." And in approximately 4 seconds, the screen scrolled with, "O thou two-wheeled steed of rubber and of chrome, thy path is long, but thou art never home." I was astonished. My weeks of sweat and soul were matched and arguably beaten by a machine I would later learn to be ChatGPT. It was impressive, sure, but as I sat there, I felt a strange sort of mental phantom limb syndrome. If a machine does the writing, the thinking, and the analyzing, what exactly happens to the parts of my brain that used to do that work? We are currently living through the great cognitive offloading. According to the Health and Fitness Association, as we delegate more and more analytical tasks to AI, we're witnessing the onset of cognitive atrophy. We're essentially turning into the intellectual versions of those humans from the movie Wall-E, floating around in chairs while the robots do all the heavy lifting. But instead of our legs atrophying, it's our synapses. To prevent our minds from becoming expensive paperweights, we must stop viewing AI as a replacement for thought and instead start implementing mental gyms, structured environments of intellectual resistance that help keep our minds sharp. The problem is that our brains are governed by a ruthless internal economy, the use it or lose it principle. This is the core of neuroplasticity. You see, our brains aren't just static blocks of marble. They're living, breathing forests of neural pathways. When we carve out a path by learning a new language or writing a poem, that path stays clear. But the second we stop walking down it, the weeds instantly grow back. When we use AI to write our emails, summarize our books, or even draft our text messages, we aren't just saving time. We're putting our synapses on a permanent, all expenses paid vacation. But why are we so eager to check into this hotel of the mind? Well, it's because we've been sold a lie. We've been told that friction is the enemy. Silicon Valley's entire goal is to make life frictionless. They want the distance between our thought and the finished product to be zero. But neurobiology teaches us that friction is where learning happens. Resistance is the only way a muscle grows, and it's the only way for our minds to stay sharp. When we stop using resistance in our daily lives, we quickly enter a dangerous 4-stage loop of decline. The first stage is augmentation, the gateway drug. You use AI to fix a synonym or find you a comma. It feels harmless, but it's very much not, because it eventually leads us to the bypass, the stage where you use AI to draft an entire paragraph for you while you go get a snack. You come back, read it, and think, pretty close. This leads us to the buffer, the stage where you start forgetting how to structure an argument on your own, simply because you haven't had to do it in so many months. Your brain's drafting muscles have gone soft. This ends up leading us to complete dependency, that stage where you stare at a blank screen and feel a genuine sense of panic because you can no longer come up with an original idea without a flashing cursor to guide you. We aren't using the tool anymore. The tool is using us. This is a very real problem. Empirical evidence using EEG technology has shown us that users assisted by AI experience a 47% reduction in relevant cognitive load. That's a fancy scientific way of saying that their brains are essentially taking a nap while the machines do all the heavy lifting. But what happens when an entire society stops lifting intellectually? Well, we're witnessing the effects of cognitive atrophy in our daily lives already. First, we have the erosion of critical verification. This is what happens when we start believing in the autocomplete life too much. We've become so accustomed to this that we no longer take the time to verify if what the AI is telling us is actually true. We've traded the pursuit of accuracy for the convenience of speed. We've become very fast at being wrong. Secondly, we're losing our narrative logic. Logic is a bridge that you build from point A to point B. When AI builds that bridge for you, you lose the ability to navigate the terrain yourself. Lastly, we're witnessing the dormancy effect. We've seen this happen before with the GPS. As we rely more and more on digital maps, we're losing our natural spatial awareness, and the size of our hippocampus is actually shrinking. Now, apply this phenomenon to basically everything in our lives. As we rely on AI for writing, we lose our verbal fluency. As we rely on it for math, we're losing our numeracy. We've become a society of information grazers. We consume a lot of data, but we're digesting none of it. So how do we fix this? Well, we in fact need to look back in order to move forward. In the year 1811, a man named Friedrich Ludwig Jahn invented something known as the Turnplatz, which was the world's first open-air gymnasium. He saw that the citizens of Germany were becoming physically weak due to the onset of the Industrial Revolution. His solution wasn't to ban factories. It was instead to build a place where people could practice resistance because the natural world was not giving it to them. We now need a Turnplatz for our minds. We need cognitive performance centers. These aren't just libraries. They're facilities like the UT Dallas Brain Performance Institute that utilize neuroarchitecture and biophilic design to remove the noise of the natural world and return the brain back to a stage of deep work. Here we can engage in intellectual resistance training. We can use neuro VR feedback headsets. Imagine you're playing a strategy game, but the game freezes the second your focus drops, even for a second. You literally cannot win unless you're thinking at your highest capacity. We can also utilize dual task stations, where you're simultaneously walking on a treadmill and solving a complex logic puzzle. This dual motion ignites the trigger of a release of a protein known as BDNF, or miracle grow for your brain. It physically stimulates the growth of new neurons. But I recognize that not everyone has a brain science center on their street corner. We can start our own reps today with simple, accessible solutions. First, we can try the analog sprints, spending just 15 minutes a day writing longhand into a journal. Studies show us that the physical act of forming letters helps ignite the motor cortex and memory centers of your brain in a way that tapping on a glass screen just never will. Secondly, we can engage with the summarization task. This is when you summarize a reading with AI, but instead of just letting it tell you what the article is about, you take the time to write down 3 things you think it will say based on the headline. Third, you can try memory anchoring. When you're sitting at dinner and you just can't remember the name of that one actor from that one movie, don't immediately reach for your phone. Give your brain a 2-minute struggle window. Let it hurt a little bit. That on the tip of my tongue feeling is the sound of your neural pathways clearing the weeds. Lastly, let's not forget the 70-30 rule. You can let AI handle the 30% of your life that is mechanical groundwork, like formatting a spreadsheet or organizing your schedule, but fiercely, aggressively protect the unique, messy human spirit of yours. So as we turn towards a future where AI only gets smarter, faster, and more frictionless, we're faced with a fundamental choice. We can choose the mental milkshake and the hovering chairs, or we can choose the intellectual treadmill. Today, we talked about the causes and the effects of cognitive atrophy, but we've also seen that the mental gyms are now open for business. You know, my father was right. The AI was able to write a story much faster, and perhaps even better than I did. But the AI didn't feel the sense of pride I felt when I finally broke my writer's block. It didn't learn the value of perseverance from a bicycle story. It didn't grow because it has no roots. So the next time you're tempted to click generate, stop. Take a minute. Step onto the intellectual treadmill. Because remember, an AI may be the bicycle for your mind, but you still have to be the one pedaling. Otherwise, you're just rolling down the hill towards a very dull bottom. Thank you.